Okay, and seeing none, we will move on to public comment. Do we have any written communications first? Madam Clerk?
Oh, I sent you a whole bunch of desk items earlier throughout the day, but we have received an email since the meeting began. I can read it for you.
Right. I'll get the 3 minutes on the timer. Are you all set?
Just a second here. Okay, it's from Anastasia, and she writes, "Hello, my name is Anastasia. I wanted to express my support for the bike lanes for this project. Although I am not a Cupertino resident, I spent a lot of my time in Cupertino because I've been an Apple employee for the last 9 years. I work on Bub Road, but frequently bike to Infinite Loop for meetings and around town to run errands or get lunch. I'm a pretty experienced biker as I often ride in the city, but I have no issue navigating less direct routes. However, However, for other colleagues of mine that are less experienced, they might have a more difficult time biking through the heavy traffic and connecting routes that are less obvious. The bike cut through would certainly make this easier to navigate and would encourage more to cycle, which would ultimately have more road space for those who need it. Sincerely, Anastasia."
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we'll move on to our call-in listeners. And first we have Lisa Warren. Let's see. Hello, Lisa Warren, are you there?
I am here, but I didn't have my hand raised, but I do have a couple quick questions. I wanted to confirm that in building 2, the senior BMR units, that they have access to the amenities in building 1, because it appears there's no amenities in building 2, and they have to cross the little, walkway to get to building 1 where there are things. I'm assuming that they do have access, but I just want to clarify that. And then, John, you said something about some of the replacement trees are off-site trees. I'm assuming, again, that means they are in the public right-of-way, but the developer has responsibility for maintaining them, et cetera. I just want to clarify that that's what a quote-unquote off-site replacement tree is. That's it. Well, other than the fact that I never like when the height and the setbacks are changed from the general plan for any reason that's just to get more stuff. But it is what it is, I guess. That's it.
All right, thank you, Lisa. And I'm going to reset the timer. And next we have Peggy Griffin. And
Madam Chair, if we could also remind the listeners to press *9 to raise their hand to speak.
Can she, I have a flyer to be displayed.
Have you sent it into the planning department?
Yes, I did. And she said she got it.
Okay, great. So as soon as your flyer's up, I'll start your timer. Okay, Peggy?
Okay. And I'll need her to move it up. I also send it to the planning commissioners. There it is. Hello?
I'm not seeing your flyer up though.
I'm not either.
Okay. Madam Clerk?
Can Peggy share her screen, maybe, if she has it up?
I don't think she's able to. I don't believe the call-in listeners are able to share their screens.
Madam Chair, I apologize for the technical difficulties. Maybe we can move on to the next speaker while we resolve this issue and come back to Peggy.
Okay. All right,
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Peggy. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, next we have Luke Lang. There. Okay, I'm going to go back. Peggy, I'm back to you. There, you're there?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, and that is your flyer?
Yes.
Okay, welcome, Peggy. I'm starting the timer.
Okay, thank you, Chairwoman Moore, commissioners and staff. I'd like you to address the issues I brought up in my numerous emails. Waiver number 3, to not distribute the BMR housing across the project. The BMR housing can be distributed across the entire project and still leave all the senior housing in buildings 1 and 2. No one has explained why this cannot be done. The waiver should be denied. Missing waiver. The BMR units should be identical in design as a market rate units. This requirement has been ignored and there's no proof that of the implementation. Applicants should either submit a request for a 4th waiver or show in writing how it's done. It sets a precedent for future projects. Parking notes. The sudden April 22nd project change to the senior enhanced alternative added 52 units to building 1, decreased the parking spaces by 69 in buildings 1 and 2, increased the need for employees due to the memory care unit, and provides no parking for employees or visitors in either building. The parcel changes and BMR issues. Can you scroll that up a little bit, please? Yes, thank you. The project proposes to change the parcel map. One parcel has the for sale market rate townhomes and row houses, and one has the senior housing and all the BMR housing. Currently, the applicant wants to receive the bonus density for both parcels, but restrict the BMR to only one parcel, which goes against the intent of our law. If allowed to do this, what prevents the sale of the second parcel and the new owner requesting another bonus density? Since the applicant is requesting to restrict the BMR to one parcel, can the city restrict the application of the bonus density to that parcel? What prevents a new owner for the for sale parcel for not implementing the second phase? Do the height and setback waivers apply to both parcels? If all the senior housing and BMR are on one parcel, can the parcel be treated as a senior affordable housing project and be held to the bonus density restrictions of 20%? I also endorse the staff's recommendation to require 2 conditions of approval that would result in the reduction of the overall total height of buildings 1 and 2. And I also endorse the do not move the bus stop, but enhance the existing one, because the senior center and the De Anza students. And I thank John for answering and helping me with all my questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peggy. And next we have Luke Lang. Luke?
Okay,
Luke,
hi,
there?
this is Luke. I have a presentation need to be brought up. Lang, yeah, there we go.
Okay, Luke, as soon as your presentation is up, I'll start the 3 minutes, all right?
Okay.
My screen shows that we're sharing his presentation.
Oh, I'm not seeing it.
No, no.
Okay, I'm gonna try this again.
Oh, okay, here we
Do
go.
you see it now? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening. My name is Luke Lang, and I'm a Cupertino resident. I want to start by thanking KT Urban for proposing a development that meets the needs of Cupertino, and that is housing without office, and especially senior and affordable housing. However, I'm concerned about the process that it's taking. The wrong, wait, I'm not, okay, that's fine. You can leave it there. The wrong process sets a bad precedence for future developments in Cupertino. I also want to point out at least one factual error from Mr. Faber. The Oaks had an approved development plan that expired around 2014. Okay, next slide, please. 3 months ago, I appeared before you and stated that this development does not meet the state density bonus waiver requirement based on the San Francisco Planning Commission study. Last week, I spoke before the City Council about the same issue. At that time, the city manager and staff didn't have any information to deny this study. Therefore, Planning Commission cannot possibly approve this project unless something is indicated otherwise. Okay, so I gave the link of the study. So next slide, please. So what that basically says is, on the left-hand side, the non-BMR development must fit within the general plan envelope. And once it does, then you move over to the right-hand side where the BMR portion of the development can request waiver to exceed the general plan envelope. Next slide, please. So what Westport has done is it's taken the general plan envelope and the density bonus is split into two parcels A and B, and it stacked all of the density bonus on top of parcel B, which resulted in excessive height and also increase the setback or decrease the setback. All right, next slide. So that's problematic. And finally, the alternative waiver is possible according to the according to our municipal code. It says the key word I just underlined: physically preclude the construction of a housing, whereas attachment 13 of the architectural review says it physically preclude the project as proposed. Well, there's no such thing as proposed in our law. And furthermore, it says that development could meet the height and setback requirements if there was waiver in other areas. So therefore, in summary, I just want to thank KT Urban again. I believe a great development of 4 stories is possible and will be great for all. The BMR units don't all have to be senior units. Alternatively, if you had a 4-story row house, and that could possibly contain all the BMR senior units. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Okay, next we have Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer?
Yes, I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
I can. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Hi, I'm Jennifer Griffin. I have been going past this site since I was a child. I actually have the pleasure of remembering the original old oak grove that was on the property before there was any development. It was magnificent. It is one of the treasured memories that I have. The oaks were huge. I mean, I'm talking about gigantic. I cannot, under any conditions, condone cutting down oak trees on the property. The bus shelter originally was in the original location was in front of the jewelry store. I used to sit there when I went to De Anza College. We had huge oaks behind it. The property was replanted with oak trees perhaps 10 to 12 years ago. I remember a lot of members of the city council were actually involved in that. I cannot condone having those trees cut down. This is called the Oaks. Someone has renamed it Westport, but it is called the Oaks. As John said, it is called the Oaks. Those trees are protected under city ordinance. I think we need to look back at the city council meetings when replacement trees were put in on the property I remember city council members that were there, and I think we need to look back because those trees are protected by law. We can't just cut them down. And yes, it will take 20 to 40 years to have a very, very tall oak tree. Then again, the corner element on Mary and Stevens Creek Boulevard is way too tall. That is way out of proportion for our beautiful corner of the city. I appreciate the architecture very much. Believe me, some of the things that have been developed in our city and other cities aren't even, I mean, having Spanish mission style is perfect for Cupertino. The problem with this project is it is too tall. There have been 10 projects proposed for this site in the last 15 years. That's why the public is confused a great deal of the time. I didn't even realize that all the plans had changed again, but if they can bring this corner element down, I am sorry, but a lot of the housing bills are from private money from unelected people, and we are a little sensitive over what has happened in Los Altos over the SB 35 last week, where they're trying to have Main Street grow from two stories to 5 stories. These are cities fighting for their lives, but under no circumstances should we cut the oaks down. Get the corner element down. It is not appropriate for this area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, next we have Eric Linskog.
Yes, hi.
Hold on. Okay, there. Hi, Eric. Welcome.
Hi. Yes, my name is Eric Linskog. I'm a resident of Cupertino. I'm also a commissioner in the Bikeped Commission, though I'll speak here as a resident. I didn't see it in the plans, that are in agenda. This easement for bikes from Mary to Stevens Creek to the west of the property in front of the row house, but I understand that may be the plan, and I support that. I think it would be great. I feel Bike 3 Boulevard kind of easement would be good enough. I'm kind of hoping that the same type of easement can be in the corridor between building 1 and building 2 and the townhouses. Because that would be an obvious way bikes also may want to cut through. Another thing that I noticed that there's in the bikeped plan, there's class 4 bike lanes planned along Stevens Creek Boulevard, and it seems to me that the corner between Stevens Creek Boulevard and the on-ramp to the freeway, that's quite likely it could change. Right now we have sort of a pork chop and a high-speed turn allowed for the cars coming from Stevens Creek Boulevard. I would think that would be squared off more, once that class 4 bike lane is put there, and quite likely the bike lane would be along the property and not in the middle of the street as it is now. So I think there be good if there's some coordination with the city's bike planning efforts here. I think that's my comments. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Eric. Okay, next we have Connie Cunningham. Let's see. Hi, Connie, are you there?
Hi.
Hi.
I am here, Commissioner. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to the Planning Commission this evening. I meant Chair, excuse me. I am Connie Cunningham. I'm a housing commissioner, speaking for myself only this evening, and I have been a resident here in Cupertino for many years. I live just south of this, out by Rainbow, off of Stelling, and I support very much KT Urban's plan for housing at Westport. I was very pleased indeed to see this iteration of the plan for this site. Senior housing and below market rate housing are critical needs in Cupertino. This is going to provide significant housing in an area that has access to transit, to business, to the senior center, and to schools. middle school, high school, and including De Anza College. The towers to me are very attractive and bring an eye-catching element. The height is comparable to the height of the Flint Center and has been attractively designed to fit in with the surrounding neighborhood. I like that Spanish style very much. A gateway project at this site was envisioned by our general plan and by the housing element. Since KT Urban recognized the leads in our city and has designed a beautiful project, I really hope that all these questions can be answered and that we can move forward with this in a timely manner. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Connie. Next, we have Richard Adler. Richard, are you there?
Yes, I am, and I have some slides.
Okay, let's see if Madam Clerk has your slides.
They're there. I saw my name. Yep,
Okay.
R. Adler, yeah. So there's 6 of those, so I'll just say next when I'm ready to move.
All right, I'm going to start the timer. Welcome, Richard.
Great. Well, good evening, and thank you, Madam Chairperson, commissioners, and staff for this chance to speak. My name is Richard Adler. I'm a 20-year resident of Cupertino, and I'm also chairman of the Cupertino Age-Friendly Task Force. Next slide. In January of 2018, Cupertino was officially recognized by the World Health Organization as an age-friendly city. Cupertino then became one of 15 cities in Santa Clara County to receive this designation, and it became part of something called Age-Friendly Silicon Valley. Now, it's important to note that the fact that Cupertino is designated as an age-friendly city does not mean that the city has reached the goal of supporting all older adults as well as possible. It means the city has identified specific areas of need and is committed to working to become more age-friendly over time. So what does it mean to be age-friendly? Next slide. According to the World Health Organization, there are 8 different elements that are relevant to senior of an age-friendly city, including housing up on top there, as well as transportation, opportunities for civic participation, and availability of community support. Our task force, the Age-Friendly Task Force, is a group of citizens who are working to make this happen. And in 2019, we published a report on the status of seniors in Cupertino. If we go to the next slide, one of the important messages from that report is there are already a substantial number of older adults in Cupertino, and that number is growing rapidly. From being just 10% of the total population in 2005, percentage grew to 12% in 2015 and is going to grow to 17.5% by 2025. In fact, if we go to the next slide, we'll see that the only age group in the community that is slated to grow over the next few years are people over 65. So there's going to be a great increase in the older population while every other age will stay the same or will actually decline. And then for the final slide, as I mentioned, that housing is one of the 8 key dimensions of an age-friendly city. And it's an important issue in Cupertino. In fact, when we conducted a survey of the older residents as part of the process of developing our application, the number one concern, the top concern identified by the residents was housing in terms of the availability of housing that is appropriate and affordable for older adults. So although our task force is not specifically taking a position on the Westport proposal, we do believe the fact that planned senior apartments will add substantially to the stock of senior housing in this community. And following me, we're going to hear from a few other members of our task force about some other aspects of senior housing. So Thank you for your time.
Okay, time's up. Thank you very much, Richard. Okay, next I see we have Mooney, and I want to reiterate that if you've dialed in and you want to speak, you need to press *9 to raise your hand to speak. And next we have Mooney.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yes, welcome Mooney. I'm starting your timer.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair and the rest of commissioners. So my name is Mooney Madhipatla. I'm a resident of Cupertino. I'm speaking for myself only, not representing any organization. So I have a comment and a recommendation and a question. So comment is, I really appreciate and applaud the developer for coming up with housing and retail only development compared to their previous attempts to try to get some office space. I mean, getting office space, would have exacerbated the housing situation in our town. So I really appreciate and applaud KDR for what they have done with this proposal. I also like the mix of the housing units as for sale units and BMR, senior and memory care units. So that's all good news. The question I have is, I think pretty much, what Peggy asked you earlier. So it looks like the developer is creating two parcels using both parcels to get the density bonus, but applying all the density on one parcel. So what prevents the developer from building the high density parcel and selling the low density parcel to someone else for that person to come back and, as a new development and ask for, new density bonus for that parcel, right? So is there some constraints that you guys are going to put where all of these is a complete deal or no all or nothing, right? On the recommendation, I don't believe 91 feet tall buildings belong in Cupertino. So the general plan allows for 45 feet tall buildings. I can see allowing for up to 60 feet as a concession. Going to 91 feet is almost like 100% increase compared to general plan. So not 35% increase. So I recommend, to reject this proposal for the tall buildings and work with the developer to come up with, proposal that's somewhere in the ballpark of, 60 feet or less, right? So we don't want, out of place construction popping up here and there within the city. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Moody. Next, we have David Stearns. David, are you there?
How about now?
Yes.
Hear me now?
I
Okay,
hear
good.
you. Right.
Yeah, I'm another member of the Age Friendly Task Force, and thanks for listening to us today. I've been in Cupertino since '77, and I've been out living at the Forum for the past 4.5 years. So I'm probably the only person here this evening who's actually living in a senior facility. I live in independent living. The Forum is a life care community, so it's got independent living, skilled nursing, and a memory care unit, by the way. And I'd like to say that I think that the Westport proposal is pretty nice. It's an excellent location, I think, for a senior thing. I like it being close to Danza and the senior center and the park. It's not as beautiful surroundings as we have at Rancho San Antonio, but it's pretty good. I really love Cupertino. I love my old house on Pear Tree Lane. We had your typical little 3-bedroom place next to a school, and sold it to a couple who's now raising kids, and they're going to go to that school. So that's the kind of thing that happens when seniors downsize and move to a new place. So I think it's a great step forward for Cupertino. I'd like to see it. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, David. And next, we have Gavin.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Give me a moment. I'll start your timer and welcome Gavin.
Hi, I'm a Cupertino resident for about 30 years now, and I just wanted to bring around 30 years, and I just wanted to bring to your notice that the idea that he didn't want to build, the developer didn't want to build office space, as well as was trying to kind of keep it within the what I would say envelope. Those are all good ideas, but I believe there are two things which do not appeal very well. One is that because it's two parcels, and one of the parcels, I believe he's trying to get the heart of the city a waiver to actually not have the setback required. That to me, it looks a little odd. First of all, it's an approach road into 280. So that's going to look very, very different cityscape wise. And I think that, there has to be a certain amount of setback along Stevens Creek, because that's the nature of the way things are going to be. And at least we need to preserve that. So the other thing is that going high. He has two parcels, and there has been a distribution that he has chosen between these two parcels. I believe that if he wants, he can move certain kind of units to the other parcel so that he doesn't have to go as high as 91 feet. I believe 45 feet is the limit, and if with the density bonus, he might be able to go up to 60 feet. I'm not very 100% sure of that, but I think that should be the limit. He should be asked. He should be kind of requested to do. And for that reason, I think the proposal as is presented now, I don't think should be something which the Planning Commission should recommend. I would appreciate if Planning Commission can look into the factor as to whether it's like a GPA or whether it's just a waiver, and to make sure that it is possible to get both the setback as well as certain vertical limits, in terms of envelope. I believe that developer is doing everything in good spirit, so I do not want to discourage the kind of development that is going on. I just hope that he is able to agree to these particular requirements, so to say, from a planning side. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Gavin. Just looking to see if we have any other callers or members of the public with their hands raised. If you have dialed in, you need to use *9 if you wish to speak. At this moment, I don't see any. I see one more. Okay, so I see Henry Sang. Henry, are you there? Let's try again. I'm trying to.
Can you hear me now?
Henry, there. Henry.
Okay, very good.
Right. And your presentation is up. You see it?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. I'm going to start the timer. Welcome.
Ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairperson, Commissioners, and staff. My name is Henry Wusang Jr. I'm speaking to you today as a member of the Age-Friendly Cupertino Task Force. My views and statements do not necessarily reflect the position of other organizations of which I'm a member. Many of us in Cupertino are busy working and raising families, paying little attention to the process of becoming a senior. You arrive at 25, blink, blink, 40 years pass, and now you're 65. You realize our lives are changing. The family home doesn't have the same buzz without the kids around. It's becoming burdensome. We travel and socialize a lot more and partake of a lot of the other Cupertino offerings. Funny how our extended family is now our network of friends and neighbors, having substituted for the traditional extended family. But aging is scary. We saw what happened to our parents, uncles, and aunts, but now us. Slide 2, please. This map of Cupertino shows 17 retirement options we listed in our 2019 report. Good news, we have options. Bad news is the population is rapidly growing and the demand may exceed the supply. Your journey may be unique to you, but it's not all that uncommon. It does tend to form a spectrum. We start independent living, covering a very wide range of independence, but then you make side trips out to rehab for the joint replacement, or maybe you have to deal with memory care. The quote, normal path oftentimes leads you even to assisted living and maybe even to full-time skilled nursing. Slide 3. Right-sizing choices exist for us today. Start with where you live, but changing living in Cupertino is expensive, whether it be rents, HOAs, property taxes, all very expensive. Senior communities offer choices, but those choices may be limited because you need to evolve and you might have to move again. Chateau Cupertino is for active seniors. Sunnyview and Forum are long-term continuing care, but a 2-bedroom at Sunnyview starts at $7,300, and a Forum is pretty expensive. The Veranda, which had 18 wonderful BMR units, filled immediately. By the way, memory care and skilled nursing probably adds on our 10K. Will the options be available for you when you need them? With an anticipated 50% growth in our population in the next 10 years, we may blow right past availability. So we need other alternative options, and one size doesn't fit all. Go to the last slide, please. As you start your journey, you're going to ask a lot of questions. How much space do you need? When do you need it? Location, you fight that with your wife. And where are you on that scale from full independence to skilled nursing? What do you expect? What's in your genes? And by the way, how much money do you have to spend? Once again, the choices we need, are they going to be available? We need them. And we strongly support the creation of a range of senior living and services option. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Right. Thank you, Henry. Okay, next I see John Kimball. And you're there.
Yes.
Great. John, you're there? Great.
Yes.
I'm starting your timer. Welcome.
Thank you. My wife Peggy and I have been at Dianza for many years. She got a degree in art history. My mentor in portraiture was Lee Takang, who was there for years. We prefer to save the beauty of Cupertino next to the city park. We have both spent years ushering at cultural events at the Flint Center across Stevens Creek. We attended an important meeting about 2 years ago in which the proposal was made to tear down the Flint Center, and a number of students were there to verbalize their interest in building student housing. Now it appears that the Flint Center shall remain and be modified. If Dianza College still wants to become more than a community college and move to a residential status, we would like to see the beautiful Oak Center, a place we have enjoyed for about 20 years. We propose to it become student housing, using the current beautiful tile-roofed, well-built buildings as dormitories and possibly a few cafeterias just across from the campus, which is already fully well-designed and landscaped. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, John. And next I see Jean Bedord. Jean?
Am I now unmuted?
Yes, welcome, Jean.
Thank you.
You see your presentation up?
I do.
Right, I'm starting your timer. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairperson, Commissioners, and staff. My name is Jean Bedord, and I've lived in Cupertino for 30 years. I'm president of the Cupertino Senior Center Advisory Council, but tonight I am speaking as a citizen member of the Age-Friendly Cupertino Task Force. Next slide. Our community is in transition. Parents with children under the age of 18 are now a minority in our city. Instead, nearly 1 in 3 households have at least one person over the age of 60. Their needs are different, and our community has not recognized the changes that need to be made for today's population. Increasingly, older adults face the reality that the family home where they raise their children no longer meets their physical needs. Walkers and wheelchairs don't go upstairs. I know. Caregiving is a reality for many of us, whether a spouse or an aging parent or a disabled child. Life happens when we least expect it. Many older adults are actively looking for housing that better suits their needs. But where do they move to? They want to stay in their community with the friends they've known for the past 20, 30, 40, or even 50 years. They also want to keep their same trusted medical providers. Next slide. There aren't many choices to make housing changes in Cupertino. My mother-in-law lived at Chateau Cupertino. Independent living was a good choice for her, though we did have to hire a caregiver to come in every morning for 15 minutes to make sure that she took her pills and was dressed for breakfast. But then she fell and broke her wrist. Suddenly, I had 48 hours to find an assisted living facility for her, since she could no longer be accommodated at Chateau. There was nothing in Cupertino. Eventually, she had to move to skilled nursing. Again, nothing in Cupertino. My husband has mobility issues, so we're actively looking for housing that doesn't require a car to go out for coffee or meet friends for lunch. But there isn't any available housing that meets those needs. Most senior housing in Cupertino is in CCRCs, which are relatively isolated and require buy-in. Isn't it time to build housing that meets the needs of our older adult community. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. Any questions?
Thank you, Jean. Okay. Our next speaker is Roma Ann Kollekar.
Hello.
Roma, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, excellent. Do you have a presentation? Yes, you do. Okay, and you see your presentation?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, I'm starting your timer. Welcome, Roma.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, Commissioners, and City staff. I am speaking for myself and not representing any organization which I belong. My name is Roma Ann Kollekar. I attend Monte Vista High School and have been a Cupertino resident for 6 years. Next slide, please. I run a blogging site called Dementia Insight, which was created in memory of my dear grandmother, who suffered from Alzheimer's. Next slide, please. As part of my initiative to spread awareness about dementia, I hosted a seminar last year in Cupertino. Respected members of our community, including Mr. Henry Sang, Vice Mayor Darcy Paul, Dr. No, and Mr. Gary Snapper presented at the event regarding dementia care. Next slide, please. As of right now, Cupertino is mostly comprised of young families. However, as early as 2030, the demographic will drastically shift as the population begins to age. According to the United States Census Bureau, by 2030, the number of adults 65 or older with Alzheimer's will almost double in the United States, as you can see in the graph. Next slide, please. From this data provided by the Alzheimer's Association, it can be seen that the prevalence of Alzheimer's in California will increase by 21% in just 5 years. Next slide, please. This chart displays the breakdown of Alzheimer's growth on a county level, and it can be seen that in Santa Clara County, it is projected that there will be 78% increase in Alzheimer's cases by 2030. While dementia care may not be at the forefront of our current priorities, it might be in just 5 years' time. It is very important that we begin planning for this eventuality now so that we will be properly equipped to handle the situation if and when it arises. One of the first steps to make Cupertino a more dementia-friendly community is to ensure that there is adequate housing for our seniors who are suffering from it. As time progresses, most households will just consist of a husband and wife after the children have gone off to college. Both people are going to be in their 60s or older, and they will not be able to properly care for themselves if one spouse gets diagnosed with dementia. Their kids could also be living in different parts of the country, so they would not be able to support their parents with their day-to-day activities. In short, it's very difficult to take care of the seniors living with dementia in their homes. The solution to this problem is the addition of memory care facilities in our community. I am glad that the City of Cupertino has already taken the initiative to build infrastructure for our seniors with memory issues. As I mentioned previously, the demand for memory care facilities is bound to increase due to the shift in the demographic. We need to be prepared for it when that happens. The City of Cupertino needs more memory care facilities in order to support residents with memory issues. Thank you so much for allowing me to comment. Is there any questions?
Kitty, you're muted.
Kitty, you're still muted.
Thank you. Okay. So right now I don't see any further individuals for public comment in the list.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Chair Moore, we did receive another email.
Oh, okay. So let's hear that and start the timer. Are you all set?
Okay.
All right.
Well, this is again from Moody, who we who we heard from earlier. There is a delay in receiving these emails from the time people send them to the time they come in. I can read it if you'd like.
I believe he went for the full time already. Would that would encompass his full 3 minutes? Is that correct? I don't know if anyone else recalls.
Madam Chair, I just went through his comments really briefly, and they seem to reflect what he already spoke about.
Okay. So we will leave it at that then. And I see one hand up in the attendee list. Let me see if I can locate that.
And that's Mr. John Kimball, and he
spoke already.
Mhm.
Okay. So we have completed the public comment. And are there any further questions based on the public comment from the commissioners at this time? Let me open to full screen.
Are we going to start discussions now?
Yes. Just going to open up my screens here.
We have to put a motion on the table, right? So before we can discuss.
Okay, let me check what we've got here on our schedule. So we have let's see. Well, we actually, according to the flow chart that I was given from our attorney, that we have members of the public speak about the agenda item. The speakers submit the request to speak, which they've done, and then chair invites the applicant or appellant to actually respond to the public. Seth, would that be the correct procedure?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so would the applicant like to address any of the comments from the public at this time?
Chair, Mark Tersini again, the applicant. One of the comments I heard tonight, and I don't want to make a big issue out of it, but it's the idea of the preservation of the oak trees. Many of those trees are cabled together and they're not in good health. And I believe the consulting arborist and the arborist that was hired during the EIR process confirmed the state and the condition of those trees on site. So I just want to make mention to those that have commented there, if there's an opportunity to transplant a particular tree, we're open to do that. But many of those trees, although are large in size, have been cabled for many years and are actually becoming a hazard, not only to the existing property, but could become a hazard to a new development going forward. We've been quite fortunate that during some of our winter winds that we haven't lost a number of those branches there. So I do want to mention that. I also did want to comment on the thought of the affordable units in building number 2 and the amenities for the project. And the amenities such as that I mentioned, the bistro, coffee shop, the common areas for meeting and gathering are all open to all residents of the project. Building 1 has a specific requirements under its license requirement that will preclude some members from the community from accessing those individual features within that building. But so there is a separation between the two. As far as the design elements of all projects or all buildings within the project, it is our intent as the owner to design and have the same level of amenities and finishes for all of the units throughout the project. So there isn't a differentiation between the affordable units and the market rate units. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark Tersini, and I see David Fung has his hand raised.
Yeah, I was as we were picking up on some of the issues raised in the questions, I just wanted to touch on a couple of those. Mr. Tersini just talked a little about access to amenities. Actually, the question was from Lisa Warren. I actually took that a little differently, that it was whether there was going to be close access. And I just did want to reconfirm the first floor of the of building 2 does include a retail portion. I believe that's the case. So the access is immediately in that building.
That is correct, Commissioner Fung.
Yes. And then the other comment was Peggy Griffin and Muni talked about a little about bonus density and the application of bonus density. And I just wanted to confirm, and I think this was actually covered in the staff report, as well as in there was a diagram from the attorney that talked about the fact that the bonus units and the exemptions are all being used in the in the high rise buildings. None of that is being applied. There's nothing that's being carried over from the townhouse row house area into the other parcel. At least that was my understanding from the staff report. I just want to confirm that as well. Thanks.
If I may, this is Andy Faber. That's correct. That is correct. They are, and in response to the comments made about the possibility of separating the parcels, and then somehow the townhouse parcel, that area now wants bonus density. I mean, there are conditions of approval that restrict the development of this project to what's outlined in the plans. So if there were to be some kind of separation and some new request made by somebody in the future, that would be completely subject to city approval. So there's no way that someone can simply sort of connive and put something over on the city, which seemed to be the worry that some of the speakers had on that issue.
And that was me. Thanks.
Commissioner Moore, I had a follow-up question on what was just talked about. May I talk?
Absolutely, Commissioner Saxena.
Yeah. So I wanted some advice from the city attorneys and city staff if we can make it a part of the approval that we can't in the future, like a restriction that we can't really apply for density bonus on the remaining parcel as a separate entity because whatever was to be applied has already been considered. Can that be a part of the thing, like part of a covenant? So, I know in the future the city council could probably change that, but we can at least put that in record so the spirit is recognized. So I was wondering if there's a legal process for that or something we could do to address that concern with the residents had raised. So it's primarily a question for the attorney and the city staff.
I would defer to the city attorney's office to answer that question regarding whether we can condition what Commissioner Saxena had stated just now.
Hi, this is Joseph Petta. Hello, Chair and Commissioners. I'm pleased to be joined tonight by our attorney, Caitlin Brown from our firm, Shoot Mahoney Weinberger, and perhaps she can answer this question. I don't know if you need a repetition. I didn't quite catch everything Commissioner Saxena said.
So the question,
go ahead.
The question I heard was whether the city can condition the project, this kind of the townhome parcel, as being unable to get further density bonuses in the future. Is that right?
Yes.
I am unfortunately not sure. That's definitely something we could look into. I don't know, Seth, if you have immediate thoughts.
I know that's not something we've looked at, Commissioner. And do you mean as part of a future potential project separate from this project entirely?
Yeah, I think the concern with residents is raised is that we are going to be dividing into two parcels, and the whole bonuses are based on both the parcels combined. But when we build it up, things change. Economy changes, interests change, and what if the second parcel is actually then resold or reacquired or repurposed, and then we again apply for a density bonus, or whoever is applying for that, for developing that parcel, then again asks for a density bonus, even though the density bonus for that particular land has already been accommodated in the bigger plan when both the parcels were combined. So I know, like in the future, the city council can change it or whatever, but is there a way of capturing the spirit of what we're doing there in some manner which conveys it in a legal way?
We'll have to circle back with you on that question. I'm not sure what the effect of past density bonus grants are on future projects on the same parcel.
Thank you.
I just have a follow-up question for Seth Petta. Is there a necessity to try to maneuver for an action which might happen in the future that you have no idea if they would attempt to do? I mean, like, for instance, when we do a developer agreement, we don't, try to assume that maybe they're going to try to change the development agreement. We're just doing that agreement at that particular time. So I'm questioning why we would need to maneuver for a potential future action.
That's a great question, and that's what I mean. That's the same question I would have in looking into the commissioner's question.
And I'm curious and this is a question for John, what is in the content in the architectural site approval permit, if I'm to understand correctly, it is addressing these towers in some way to have them removed and altered. Is that correct?
There's a few things about the tower elements too. For one, it's perception that the whole building is 91 feet and whatnot, when actually the massing is probably closer to 80, 79 feet. And again, anything we can do that is within our discretion to lower the height of the building, especially for a portion of the building that has no purpose, for unit density or for the BMR units and whatnot. I think it's a step towards, addressing some concerns of the community and whatnot, and also providing maybe a better architectural element that's more favorable to the existing ordinance and more in line with what the city's vision is. And we've talked about it internally, and we believe that it is with the city does have the discretion to require that as a condition of approval.
All right, thank you. And this is another question for Attorney Seth Petta regarding the parcel 1 and 2 issue. Is it a correct reading to look at density bonus law over the whole site as though it was, one parcel as opposed to having it, being two? Does it alter how density bonus is applied, whether you're having it separated into two parcels or not?
Madam Chair, I can actually speak to that if that's okay, Seth. So the answer is it doesn't matter if it's over multiple parcels. The density bonus law specifically says for the purpose of calculating a density bonus, the residential units shall be on contiguous sites. And that can be either mapped separately or sites that are not subdivided yet.
That was my understanding. Thank you. I see that Commissioner Takahashi has his hand raised.
Yeah, going with regard to this concept of two parcels, and in the future, some event where a density bonus would be requested by a separate owner. You have residents on that property at this point in time that own those condos and row houses. Is the fear that a developer would come in? Wouldn't they have to physically buy out all of those residents if they were planning on scraping that and building a much bigger structure? I guess.
No, I think Mike, I was not thinking that far ahead. I was just thinking.
Are you in bed?
So I was just thinking that, okay, we build something, we build the rental thing, and some economic conditions change, something changes, and people have second thoughts about the other parcels. And then what happens, And I mean, when they are separately deeded, they could be in principle be sold. I mean, our approval gives them a right, but not the obligation to build. So that's also
that was my question was, as an owner of a row house, 20, 30 years from now, is it really feasible that somebody could, this could happen?
No, even before it is built.
Worth the discussion because it was infeasible. I guess.
Even before it is built. So once we partition, there are two separate pieces of property.
You're worried more prior to actual project.
Yes. Prior to the completion of the thing the whole project.
Yeah, that seems pretty paranoid to me, but I'll leave it at that.
I would say we've seen everything so far in the last 5 years. So there's no such thing as too much paranoia. So I'll just leave it at that.
The residents raised that concern, so that's why I was wondering if there's a way we can at least capture the spirit of the approval in the approval documents itself.
So I'll actually just comment that this actually came up in the earlier clarifying questions about related to for purchase or rental, and traditionally the planning department has favored rental for large projects like this, because for exactly the reason that's come up here, the chances of being able to redevelop to higher density or to a different use in the future are much lower when you have to get, in this case, 80 or 90 people to agree to sell their property to do this. I mean, it's not to say that it couldn't be done. So, it's interesting here. In the past, I think, you see the things, the notation in the general plan about site consolidation being favored. Those are all things that, are planning elements that I think have been raised as concerns here, in the Planning Commission in our discussions. So it's an interesting thing here where, they have asked for a condo map. I hope that this is a good opportunity to kind of, for the people who felt there should be more for sale housing, that should be good. Hopefully they'll be supportive of that. I think that for the people who are concerned that there might be some unusual redevelopment, because we're in tough economic times. So suppose something happened and that couldn't get developed in the short term. It's possible. Again, that just becomes a reason to support the subdivision and allow those units to be considered for to be for sale as well as rental.
I do have a question for staff and just a question in general in terms of how we're interpreting our density bonus law. And I think that's a very important question, because there seems to be different ways and different styles across different cities. And I'm just trying to understand. I know there's one approach where you can actually do a way to actually do a base project, and that base project then has to comply with development standards. And then, waivers are only for additional bonus units. Is there a reason we did not consider that, just for the staff?
I can start off answering, and then I can, have if Caitlin can follow up with kind of the, how does state law come into play with what we can require. It is very true. This certain cities do ask for, like, San Francisco will ask for, a project without waivers, what would that look like, and whatnot as well. And we did sort of do that with RRMs, the third party architect and whatnot as well. Regardless of but at the end of the day, those are just procedural as part of the application. All cities in the state of California have to adhere to the same law in terms of density bonus, and we do have the same limitations in terms of the findings we have to make and whatnot, and we all have to adhere to the precedents of Walmer. For example, the case of Walmer versus the city of Berkeley, which is pretty much the only density bonus case law that kind of governs how we approach the density bonus law and its implementation with developments. So, we do our best to push and to justify the waivers, and for the applicant to justify the waivers and whatnot. But we all have to make the same findings at the end of the day, and those findings are for approval, and also we make the findings for denial. And that's it. I don't know if Caitlin, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just kind of lay out the legal standard. So in the density bonus law, the question is, the standard is that the city is prohibited from applying any development standard that will have the effect of physically precluding the construction of an eligible development at the densities or with the concessions or incentives permitted by the law. This project doesn't request any concessions or incentives, but it is proposing to develop at 294 units. So it's up to the Planning Commission to determine, based on the facts and staff's recommendation, whether denying the waiver request would physically preclude the density bonus development. As John mentioned, there's been one case that has interpreted the standard, Walmer versus City of Berkeley. And I think it might be helpful to give a little background on that case. So in Wolmer, Berkeley granted waivers for height, number of stories, and setbacks in order to accommodate the project and its amenities. Those amenities included a community plaza, an interior courtyard, and high ceilings in both the retail and residential portions of the development. An individual challenged that granting of the waivers and argued that the city couldn't waive development standards in order to accommodate project amenities. And the court held that nothing in the statute requires the applicant to strip the project of its amenities that would require a waiver of the development standards. And the court held that the city proceeded in the manner required by law in granting the waivers, because if it hadn't granted the waivers, that action would have had the effect of physically precluding the construction of a development meeting the criteria of the density bonus law. So we worked with the third-party architectural firm and found that applying the city's height and slope line standards would reduce the size of some of the units. It would reduce the ceiling heights in the commercial portion of the development. It would significantly reduce open space, and it would move additional parking underground and remove retail support space. And just to quickly walk through the findings to deny the waivers, the city can deny the waivers if they find that the application of the city's height or slope line standards or BMR dispersion requirement does not preclude the construction of the development, or if they find that a waiver or reduction would have a specific adverse impact upon health or safety or the physical environment, if they find that the waiver would have an adverse impact on any real property that is listed in the California Historical Register, and or if the waiver or reduction would be contrary to state or federal law. And it's ultimately up to the Planning Commission to recommend to the City Council and for the City Council to determine if they can make any of these findings.
So if we were to apply the approach that San Francisco does in terms of implementing their state density bonus program, and I think you're very knowledgeable, so you probably are aware of bulletin number 6. If we were to apply that in this process, would this still fit within the permitted building envelope? If we were to run the same thing in terms of starting with the base project? I mean, their approach is basically, they start with the base density and they work their way out from there with the exceptions, and then they figure out what the bonus project is. What would we end up with in that process?
So I can't speak. I can speak to San Francisco. I was able to talk to a few of their planners, and the reason that they ask applicants to submit a base project is because they have a different type of density. Their density is form-based zoning, where you don't know when an applicant comes in how many units can fit on the site. There's no 30 dwelling units per acre standard. We are aware that San Francisco's application materials say that the waivers are to be for the additional density. And it's going to be ultimately up to the Planning Commission to determine if they can make those findings.
But is all San Francisco form-based?
Half of San Francisco is form-based, or not half. I can't say half and half, but some of San Francisco is form-based. And in that zone, they do require a base project submission. Where it's not form-based, they do not require a base project submission.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you don't mind, I just want to comment at this point. We don't live in San Francisco. It's clear that the law allows, this is actually something that got touched on in some depth in the recent case in Los Altos, the SB 35 case in Los Altos, that cities have discretion to modify the standards. However, that discretion is only to allow for, greater than the minimums that are called for in state law. So, it's just not the case, regardless of what, there are many things. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to me here, because I feel that, we often hear that people don't like the idea that, that the state, they would like to not comply with state laws because they're not from here. And so I think that having a discussion about applying San Francisco's, bonus density rules seems like an odd thing to be discussing.
I think Commissioner Fung, the reason for bringing that up is because we don't have a lot of case law history, and we have a city that's actively applying a different approach without being sued or having any specific issues. I don't think it always applies to expanding the amount of housing units. And we also have a massive concern from residents about the height, right? And the height. And I understand that the developer has made a significant investment in trying to get those 5 extra units, and then that wasn't enough, so they went for a little bit more. So they reduced the size of all their units to be able to put 53 more additional units there instead of the 5 that they originally requested. And so I think what the question was asking about was, was there a precedent out there in another area, San Francisco being a close neighbor of ours, that we could actually look to as a precedent, where a lot of these interesting housing bills have been passed and where you've been an advocate of form-based code in other areas. I just wanted to bring that up so that, council has an option to think about that as to, whether this makes sense in terms of the way we interpreted our density bonus laws, because we are unfortunately and fortunately in some way setting a precedent, especially with future ministerial projects. And we really should make sure we've considered all our options. So just making that point.
I understand your comment, but again, the places in which that base calculation is done are, that actually was in that one of those documents that was passed that was distributed before the meeting. That is in areas primarily of form-based code, and we don't have that here. So
primarily, not necessarily exceptional to form-based code. You can apply it without form-based code. I'll try to find an exception at some point, but it's been used with form-based code because it's convenient to do so. I do understand that.
Commissioner Takahashi?
Yeah, I guess it seems to me it's a slippery slope to reference San Francisco's procedure, given I would in no way ever compare San Francisco to Cupertino. And the state laws are written specifically to address this type of issue, and cities looking for every angle and way to prohibit high density housing. And it's really clear from the perspective of how cities behave. It doesn't seem to me there's any grounds by which we could deny this in terms of the findings. The finding is clear of the findings that we have to come up with in order to deny it, and they're not there. And so it's kind of concerning, I guess. To Commissioner's point about the masses complaining about the height. I mean, we had 8, 10, 13, 14. There were 3 that discussed height as being problematic. And so I wouldn't say it was a massive outcry of concern about the height. I mean, of all the commissioners here, I am probably the closest to the project. I'm just outside the area where I would have to abstain. And I'm concerned about the height as well, but given the need for housing and given what the state is trying to do, which I support what the state is trying to do because of the fact that cities like ours have had this tendency to do everything possible to discourage the development of high density housing. And so we're the poster child in this particular case, and this particular project is really very much one that is front and center with regard to the density bonus and the Housing Act. And so I don't know, I guess seems to me the discussion is not necessarily, I mean, it's good to have the discussion, I admit, but it sure seems to me that it's one that is, we don't have a lot of basis. There's not a lot of elements, we don't have a lot of legs to stand on.
I think that one of the issues with this particular project is that you have the lower townhouses over a great deal of the project, and you could actually get more density in and have lower heights on the east side were you to have apartment style buildings throughout the entire project. Overall, you could end up with more. And then you also have the location next to De Anza College, and the city's been asked if how can we help provide teacher housing for the teachers at Danza and student housing as well, which, neither of those are particularly being addressed here. So I think, it does go beyond, we have these two tall buildings and people have issues with those, to how are the waivers being applied here, and are they being applied correctly? Are we following case law? Does the 0.79 acre project up in Berkeley equate to our 8 acres here and the type of project that we have going on, or not? And then also with regards to, the density bonus baseline, and, it still is my understanding that you have to look at the base project excluding the density bonus units and have it meet the general plan requirements. And I believe that's why an outside architect that John mentioned had looked at a previous plan for that analysis. So I don't, I think there are people that just simply don't like the height, but then there is the legal aspect that are we making a decision which is following the statutes and the case law for housing.
Yeah, I think in this case, it is a complicated project because of the fact that it's quite mixed, literally, in terms of a retail element, the townhouse row house, which it's obvious you want to maximize value at that of that, and that becomes the economic driver for the whole project, really. And so, with all of those constraints in place, to me, it's you could see how you would come to this particular project as the project before us, I guess you could say.
But see, one way back to what Chairwoman Moore was saying is that you could, if those townhouses weren't built, you could actually disperse those units across and have for sale units of condos to achieve the same result without having the same height. And you could actually probably get even more units in there, right? And I think the question really is how you want to look at, the bonus law, right? They had 5 additional units on the way in, and they're like, hey, we're not getting enough out of it. Fine, let's go add some more and look at the law and see what we can do, and check in with our lawyers, check with all the consultants, see what we can do. Imagine if it was flipped the other way and said, don't put the 5 additional units.
From the developer, though, that we came in with 5 and the request by the city, and I don't know the truth here because I'm not privy to the development of that project, but that the city was the one that recommended, hey, if you're going to go density bonus, why are you only asking for 5 units? Why wouldn't you ask for more? So I guess
I hope we didn't do that. We could have said, hey, why not just take 5 off and make it shorter and fit those 5 across a couple floors. You got 4 or 5 floors to go across. You can go the other way, is what I'm saying. So
yeah, I think that it's more likely if there was such a discussion, and I don't know anything of it, any detail of it either. I suspect it's more, if you're going to have this additional height, it shouldn't be for such a small number of units. That I can see that discussion happening. I would actually say I had a number of notes about things that I thought were interesting observation about this project. We've had a couple people mention now that, well, the townhouses, because they are low, they it shifts the balance and causes the taller buildings. It's interesting to me. Those buildings are 30 feet tall. I suspect were they to bring forward a proposal that did exactly what you said, and in fact that's not that different than the first one. When those buildings came back at 45 feet, you would hear at people coming in to complain, wow, 45 feet is way too tall on Mary. So in a lot of respects, I think it's interesting that there's certainly been no shortage of input on this project. And it's interesting to me because I think that, I look at it, with my apologies to KT Urban, I actually like the one of the earlier designs as well, with a apartment building there, or a condo building. But I think in terms of being responsive to the feedback that they're getting from the community, lower that side, reduce the impact. Those are, build houses that are for sale, don't build small houses, don't build, all the kinds of things, all the kinds of feedback that was given to them over all these years now, I believe is reflected in the design that you see today.
I mean, look, I would say I'm excited about the project. I think I want to make sure the resident concerns are included in this, and some of the public health safety ones I talked about with density and senior living. I have a question for our attorneys. And I'm worried about precedent and process. That's really what I'm more worried about going forward. So it's not that I'm opposed to the project. I love the idea. I'm just worried about the precedent and that we set going forward, as other people have mentioned. And so I have a question to our attorneys, like the city's attorneys and our side. So does this mean that any project that contains density bonus units is able to obtain any degree of exception, even heart of the city, right? Is this, in using a reasonable person standard, I mean, we could deny on the basis that height could be even more evenly distributed throughout the project, meaning that lower maximum heights and less extreme setback exceptions?
So is your question, can the city redesign the project to fall within the slope line?
With our setback exceptions, yeah, within our general plan requirements.
So kind of to take a step back, waivers are for development standards. Development standards are defined quite broadly in the density bonus law as encompassing things in the municipal code, general plan, specific plans. The question before the Planning Commission is whether to approve the project as proposed, which includes the requested waivers. You've heard that staff's recommendation is to approve those waivers, and it's going to be up to the Planning Commission and the City Council to determine whether the specific waivers that are requested have been meet the standards set out in the density bonus law.
In terms of a reasonable person, I mean, can we deny on the basis that height should be more distributed? Is there any reason that would preclude us from doing so? I mean, could a reasonable person deny based upon, changing the height more evenly?
No.
Well, I mean, Andy, I'm not asking you, but of course you'd say no, it's okay.
I'd like to respond to that, actually, if I could, if you wouldn't mind. Is that possible? My response to
I'd ask the chair.
Person standards. The old standard is that essentially that however a city interprets its own policies and zoning and so on will be upheld unless it's manifestly unreasonable. That's the old standard, and it applies in other kinds of projects. For example, if this were an office building project, the standard of the city's interpretation would be upheld, assuming it wasn't completely, unreasonable. The reasonable person standard only goes in one direction. It says that a project is deemed to be consistent, not inconsistent, but consistent with city policies if a reasonable person, based upon substantial evidence, would believe it is. So it's really a one-sided standard. It's designed to say that if it could reasonably be argued that the project is consistent, then the courts will say it is consistent. It doesn't work the other way. In other words, it doesn't say the city can say, well, I'm reasonable, I'm a city person, I'm reasonable, I think it's inconsistent. It's really, and it's designed that way. And that standard has been put into SB 35. It's been put into the Housing Accountability Act about 2 years ago to change the whole way of interpretation. Because it was done very intentionally by the state to really limit the city's ability to interpret its own policies. As I say, it only applies to housing projects. It doesn't apply to other kinds of projects. But as to housing projects, it's a one-way street that's in favor of the developer, actually, on that issue. So I wanted to correct that.
Would our attorneys like to comment on that?
So the Housing Accountability Act has, and the density bonus law, the findings have to be made based on substantial evidence. And the city staff and working with the architect has laid out the evidence that we are presenting to you. We have the language of the statute, and we have the single case in Wolmer interpreting that waiver standard.
I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that we can apply San Francisco because it's San Francisco, but then we're using Wolmer on this side. Would a reasonable person find it, necessary to make such exceptions, with one side being much lower in height than the other side being much higher? I mean, that's going to be a very interesting conversation if that were to happen. I mean, I'm just saying that, right? I mean, I'm worried about creating a precedent. I'm not opposed to the project. and the concept of the project. I think it's awesome. I actually really think it's a great project. I'm just really worried about the precedent that we set up. And if we create an exception to heart of the city just for retail, but we don't create an exception in another part, right? And we respect heart of the city somewhere else, but sometimes we won't respect the general plan amendment or general plan without a general plan amendment. I mean, it's so messy, right? And I'm sure it's very hard for the lawyers. I'm sure it's very hard for the city staff to make that interpretation, But it's setting a bad precedent, and that's what I'm really worried about.
I do have a question. We have waivers for height, slope setback, and dispersal, but what is the 75% retail reduction? How is that categorized? That's not a waiver. What is it?
The applicant.
Go ahead.
The applicant is applying for an exception to this heart of the city standard, and there's a resolution that lays out the findings that need to be made. It's staff's recommendation to approve them. I think perhaps John can talk through the specific findings if you want to hear those now.
Sure. And I can give me 2 seconds to just pull up the resolution itself. But as I'm pulling it up, it's a standard. It's an exception process that we have in our own municipal code. It's not. It's as far as my understanding, it's not governed by any state ordinance or state vote. Or inhibited by any state laws or whatever else too. And in fact, it's been applied multiple times along Stevens Creek Boulevard. Even the Veranda project had the heart of the city exception for the retail portion as well. I'm trying to find this here. I got it right here. So what I want to show you are the findings that you have to make with the heart of the city exception. And I pull up the resolution and I'll share my screen. Everyone's got that. So, everyone good? Okay. So really, the first finding is that is this project consistent with the general plan and the zoning ordinance and the goals of the specific plan? And for the most part, yes. Besides the waivers, it is consistent. Is it injurious to property or improvements and detrimental to public health? No. Is this will it create a hazardous condition for pedestrian vehicle traffic? No. So, does the development have legal access to services available?
Can you blow that up? It's
sure.
I'm getting older. I can't see anything. So.
I'm not far behind. So is that better?
Yeah, much better.
So, does it have legal access to public streets and public services? Yes. Does the proposed development require an exception that which involves the least modification for the deviation? So with this one, it goes back to what we had to look at before with that scenario that the applicant submitted where they showed, okay, if we were to follow this, how much retail will we have? What it came out to be was just slightly more than 20,000 square feet, which is pretty much what they're proposing right now. It's just not all along Stevens Creek. They put it along Mary Avenue, which is an area which is not required, but has a better potential to be used to have more vehicular and pedestrian traffic, and even bicycle traffic as well. And with that location closer to the 85 on ramp, staff was in agreement that that it wouldn't be the highest and best use of that portion of the property, that it wouldn't be the best location for retail. Had this been a mid-block somewhere else in Stevens Creek Boulevard, we probably have a different approach to it possibly. But being where the project location is, we understand where the applicant was coming from taking that portion that would be required of Stevens Creek and moving it to Mary Avenue, where it's people feel more comfortable walking, interacting with the senior center, even the park. There's more of a exchange of there's more visibility, to say, with the general public. I'll stop sharing right now.
Thanks, John.
I'm a little curious where something becomes a waiver versus an exception. because this is an exception. It's in the heart of the city specific plan. Is that correct? The 75%.
Correct. So
okay,
it's
just sort of legally, like, why is this called an exception as opposed to another waiver? And they could take unlimited waivers, is my understanding. So why? I'm just curious why it ended up being drawn up this way.
Well, I again, you have to, this is a standard in the heart of the city exception. I'm sorry, the heart of the city specific plan, and the specific plan does give a process for exceptions, and it's laid out. And these findings are actually from the specific plan itself. Could the applicant have asked for this as a waiver? I think they could have made the argument they could have. So I think that would be a better question for the applicant themselves as to why didn't they ask for this as a waiver instead of an exception.
Okay, so it wasn't the city's decision to do it this way. And then my other question is, if someone could define and explain why you have the waivers versus the concessions, and what, if you were a developer, why would you choose a concession or versus a waiver? Because you could ask for them the same thing. You could choose height to be a concession or a waiver. What's the trade-off there?
I'm happy to speak to the difference between concessions and incentives. Concessions and incentives are a single thing. Waivers versus concessions and incentives. So it basically comes down to what standard the applicant has to meet in their application. So the standard for a waiver is, will a development standard have the effect of physically precluding the construction of that density bonus development at the densities permitted? Whereas a concession or incentive is also a reduction in site development standards or an approval of a mixed use zoning or other regulatory incentives. But the standard to get an incentive or concession is different. The standard there is that it has to result in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide for those affordable housing costs or affordable housing rents. So it depends on the reason that they need to reduce that development standard, whether it's because it would physically preclude the project, or they need it because it will make their project, it will make it possible for them to reduce the affordable housing costs or rents.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Wong?
Okay, so I got a question for our attorneys, and back to the reasonable standard piece. How unreasonable would an exception have to be for a reasonable person to find it unreasonable? And what I mean by this, like for this project, what would those height and setback numbers have to be? And I don't know, if we can't have hard numbers, what would be other objective ways of assessing this type of question or these types of questions?
So I think to speak to one part of your questions, for waivers and incentives and concessions, there's no numerical limit. So for example, for a density bonus, an increase above the maximum density, that is a 35% increase or a 20% increase. The standard for waivers is physical preclusion. Does the development meeting the criteria of the density bonus law at the densities allowed? Would it be physically precluded by the application of the city's development standards? And we have the Wolmer case, and I don't think there's a specific hard and fast answer.
Right. But there's no case. Like the case in Berkeley doesn't necessarily apply to us just as much as the case in San Francisco doesn't necessarily apply to us in terms of how they're interpreting, because this is kind of new, right?
Caitlin, can I weigh in on one thing? Just let's be clear about the difference between published case law that's precedent and an example
practice that hasn't been tried.
Those are not cases. Yeah, those are other cities' practices that have not reached the courts.
Okay. But then why does physical preclusion not apply to putting the height in other parts of the project?
I think your question is gets at the requirement that the city look at the project as it comes to the city. And the project didn't come to the city with the height proposed in a different part of the project. And I think Gian touched on this earlier with an answer saying, look, they could have come with a different project, a revised project, but this is the one that we're dealing with and analyzing tonight.
Can I make a suggestion? If the architects can explain what would be the effect of doing the sort of thing that Commissioner Wong is mentioning about spreading the buildings out to other parts of the project. I mean, the Walmer case very clearly, and it is the only case law, says we don't have to do that. I mean, that case is very clear on that point. Certainly, it's a smaller parcel. I understand that, Chairperson Moore. Nonetheless, it's the only case law there is. But I think from an architectural standpoint, there are a lot of reasons why when you make certain changes to a project, it has a ripple effect that changes a lot of other things and may make the project quite infeasible. The architects can explain that to you, I'm sure, if you ask them that question. Because it's not just a question of moving blocks around on a piece of paper, then saying, why don't you do it that way? It just isn't that simple.
I mean, back to our attorneys. I mean, for example, could we choose 1,000 square feet and then just put 50 stories on that for BMR reasons? Like, I'm thinking about these exceptions, right? I mean, we could go straight up. Why not? You know, it's a BMR exception, right? Woo!
Chair Moore, I have a question for you, just a kind of procedure question. It's a little unusual to have this part of the discussion be among the applicant's attorney and the city's. So it's up to you as the chair, but you should provide some direction here.
How about I ask you to provide some direction to find some way that we can move to a point where we are making a motion. If there is some suggestion for how we get from this point to that point, you know. Do you have some guidance?
Probably makes sense. I'll make a motion to approve. How's that?
Okay, so if you
have any kind of closing discussions or comments prior to that motion and vote, typically that's an opportunity for commissioners to you know, just outline from their perspective the merits and demerits of a given project, and I don't know.
With Commissioner Takahashi, to Seth's point, we could make a recommendation to approve and then have that discussion, and then we can be in that conversation point.
Okay.
I think from parliamentary procedure standpoint, we probably do want to take a motion, and then you can make your comment at that point.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval, and then we can start taking the comments.
We need to do that more formally.
May I do this?
Yeah. All right.
May I?
I'm happy to do it too. It's just reading a lot of stuff.
Okay. Is someone prepared to make the recommended action from the Planning Commission staff report, which is the long reading?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Commissioner Fung, please do so.
Let's see.
And first, let me double check with Council Attorney Seth Petta. How are we doing? Have we followed procedure to this point? Are we ready to make a motion?
You're doing great. Yeah, you could discuss further, or someone could make a motion, which I'm sure will be followed by more discussion.
Right. Okay. So there's been some mention that when we switched from Robert's rules, that what we're supposed to be doing is making a motion and then having a deliberation on that motion at that time afterwards. And I believe that's what we're going to be doing now. Is that acceptable?
We were supposed to be doing that before, I think, under Robert.
Actually, we probably should have been. Yeah, we should have made the recommendation to approve.
You're talking about Rosenberg's, right?
Right. We moved to Rosenberg's.
Yes. Then proceed as you said. Yes, that sounds good.
All right, Commissioner Fung.
Yeah. So let's see. How should we do this? Should I just read the recommended actions? Is that the appropriate, or do you want the header from each of the items?
Chair
right?
Moore, this is if
Chair.
I might also remind the commission.
Sorry.
There are some desk items, conditions of approval that have been redlined, so to please include that as part of the motion as well.
Yeah. Let me pull that.
Are we more than 20 items now?
Where's that? Yeah.
That's within the presentation.
Somebody can pull that up.
Page 4.
So do I need? Should I be reading the beginning of each of the resolutions? That's the procedure. Right?
Yes, the recommendation text, and please begin with the EA.
Okay.
Here we go. Start here.
Yeah.
Commissioner Fung, I'll make it easy for you.
No, I see it. Okay, so First, with regard to draft resolution EA 2018-04, the Planning Commission recommends that the City Council certify the environmental impact report, adopt and make conditions of approval of the mitigation measures, and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached here to as Exhibit EA. Is that good? The second item, item DP 2018-01. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the developmental permit in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached hereto as Exhibit DP. The third one, draft resolution ASA 2018-05. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the architectural and site approval permit in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached hereto as Exhibit ASA. Is this one of the ones that had a notation? There was an amendment on, well, I guess I'll shoot through and we'll come back. We'll circle those
Commissioner
back.
Fung, you could just roll those in as red lines presented tonight by staff.
Oh, all right. Okay. The next one is U 2019-03. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the use permit in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached hereto as Exhibit U, as amended with red lines as provided by staff. The next one, draft resolution TM 2018-03. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the vesting tentative map in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached hereto as Exhibit TM. Next, draft resolution EXC 2019-03. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the Heart of the City exception in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached hereto as Exhibit EXC and subject to red line. And then finally, draft resolution TR 2018-22. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the tree removal permit in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached hereto as Exhibit TR.
And Commissioner Fung, if I might remind you to add the red line language to the DP resolution as well.
Okay, yes. Can I just say that is to add the red line?
Correct, to incorporate the red lines presented by staff.
So I'm going to amend the motion on DP 2018-01. The Planning Commission recommends that the City Council approve the development permit in substantially similar form to the draft resolution attached hereto as Exhibit DP, subject to the red lines provided.
And just to correct the number, I believe it's DP 1805.
Oh.
Just GP, can you verify that?
Yeah. 2018-05. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Yes, it says 05 in the document name is 2018-05, but the internal name is 2018-01.
And we can, that might be a typographical error. We can fix that.
All right. And that is, so I move we adopt those.
All right, I'll second it.
May I ask a question for our attorney? Would we require a friendly amendment to review and potentially relocate the bus stop in vesting tentative map TM 2018-03? Would that require a friendly amendment, or would that automatically be something that staff would be looking at?
You could add it as a friendly amendment. Did I just hear a second from someone?
Yes, there was a second.
Okay, so yeah, you could add it as a friendly amendment, and you'd need an approval from those two movers.
Yeah.
I'll second that as well if Commissioner Fung approves.
Yes, I have no issue with that. I think that, I mean, the prior discussion was that this was going to be subject to review by the city staff and Caltrans. But yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay. So we'll consider it amended with that addition. Okay, so we can begin our discussion.
I'd like to continue where I left off. So I just want to repeat that I'm really concerned about setting precedent. I mean, if I do support this recommendation of approval, it's not an endorsement of what I think is really problematic. I mean, this is a very bad approach in treatment of density bonus law. For example, like in the example I said, if an applicant chooses a very minor part of the overall land area, in this case, and 1,000 square feet and submitted a plan that went up 50 stories on that 1,000 square feet while the rest of the plan stayed at 2 stories, what we're being told here is that density bonus requirements would apply a reasonable person standard. And no one can tell me what that reasonable person would be allowed to believe is unreasonable. I mean, the answer needs to be provided in a matter of due diligence by our legal advisors, and sooner for obvious reasons rather than indefinitely later. I mean, this is going to hit all jurisdictions, right? So, I mean, back to our attorneys, I mean, what would we do here?
So right now you're being asked to consider the Westport project, and you have to base your decision on the facts of the Westport project rather than hypothetical projects. I understand that's frustrating, and we could discuss the hypothetical questions at a further housing law or density bonus law study session. I know after the last one, there was a request for a further one.
I'm going to push back and say that's not necessarily true, because the decisions we make here will have precedent later in other conversations, right? So yes, we are considering in the concept of just this one, but why can't you address just this project, right? I mean, in this specific case, if we actually allowed that to happen, I mean, I'm just very curious as to why we can't even answer that question.
So if I can rephrase your question, Commissioner Wong, so you're asking if there's any reasonable limit on the in this case the amount of height that the applicant could ask for by using a waiver under the density bonus law? Or
can we talk about even the height more evenly distributed? Can we even talk about that?
Absolutely, you're free to talk about it amongst yourselves, but Caitlin has already provided the legal standard under the density bonus law, which is the physical preclusion standard. And that's what we have to go on in the statute. Now, you can certainly talk about other design, alternatives that you would prefer for the project, but that's not the project before you tonight.
I know, but I think we're setting bad precedent. That's all. So,
if I may, I understand your point, Ray. I think that in this particular case, I would not worry in a case where there was an opportunity to take more units. And they didn't. They chose to do, chose to a particular, that in a world where we are finding that can we get projects which are residential projects, there was no question about that. So I think that although I understand your point, I feel like this is not the one that's going to push, that becomes a precedent-setting issue for the future. That's my my nickel on that.
I was wondering if our attorneys could address the term precedent as it's being used here, because Walmart versus the city of Berkeley, that does have precedent for us. And what influence, air quotes, does our decision here have for other projects in the area?
Each project will be looked at separately and will be a similarly fact-intensive analysis where the Planning Commission and then the City Council will be asked to determine whether the project that's being proposed is physically precluded by the waivers, by the development standards that the future applicant is asking. Granting a waiver in this case doesn't automatically grant a waiver to a future applicant.
Right, okay. And also the physical preclusion sounds like a geometry issue. Whereas when you're looking at your concessions, you're looking at the financial aspect to it. And I think there's some, confusion where the developer would want to have the row houses and townhouses and be able to sell those, and that has an economic value. And our impulse is to say, wait, you could make more money if you had it denser over in that part of the project, if you sold off, 2 condominiums rather than, you know, just a single. You doubled it up. You got a little higher, but you stayed under the 45 feet. So I think that's the impulse is to not look at the physical preclusion, which sounds, like I said, like geometry, but look at the economics of it differently. And I think that's also part of the struggle that people have had looking at this term waivers. And you know, honestly, I don't really like the waivers aspect. I think it adds a lot of ambiguity and confusion to, you know, making decisions. I think they've made it hard for us. Okay.
Sorry for the dead air. Was there? We can answer a question if you have one. But I may have missed it.
Well, I guess the physical preclusion really is a question. You know, what am I correct? Is it the geometry of it? You know, if you remove the density bonus units and you go back to a base project, did the base project did it meet the general plan standards or not? And you know, and what do they mean by that statement?
So what we have is the language in the statute and then Wolmer's interpretation of the waiver provision, which was that it's the project and its amenities, which includes things like open space, ceiling heights. Those were the ones that were at issue in Wolmer.
Right. Okay. And they had like 15 feet for the ground floor commercial. And then how much taller would you know did they make that structure with their waiver?
I'm not sure. I believe it was in the realm of a story or two, but I would need to go back and look.
That's my recollection as well, and I know it was much smaller. So I think, you know, it is harder to argue when you have this kind of a layout for the project. So I can understand people's frustration with it. Is there anyone else? What I can do is call, you know, going through the whole commission and then go call for a vote. So Commissioner Saxena, would you like to comment?
Yes, I personally feel that overall I really like the project, the mix, the senior housing, the BMR housing, the combination of townhomes and apartments. I think my only and the primary concern is about the height of building one. I would like to see that mitigated in some form or the other, maybe reduce the tower or maybe plant higher trees there up front by transplanting some bigger trees rather than waiting to 20 to 40 years for the trees to grow. Regarding the bonus density law question, which Vice Chair Wong has been raising, I have to defer to the legal interpretation there. And I think getting clarity on that is really important. I think so far, I don't think we have received that clarity in some way. And there's not much we can do about it here tonight. So I'm not going to leave it as that and assume that we are taking care of that and interpreting the law correctly there.
Thank you. Commissioner Takahashi?
Sure. So first, I definitely welcome the addition of housing and the fact that this is a housing and retail project and that it's senior housing and BMR is also added benefit. With regard to the traffic, I think that is the analysis is one of, I mean, it's a dead mall, so current traffic pattern is very low. So future traffic state will definitely be worse than current state versus comparing it to 80% occupancy, which I think is somewhat flawed, but you know, so be it. So I guess what I'm saying is I think there will be a traffic impact, but I think it will be manageable. While I think the overall height and the scale of building one is a concern, I understand the rationale for it. And with the fact that it's aligned with the density bonus law and the Housing Accountability Act, understand the need for that. Again, just reiterating that I really feel like the density bonus and the Housing Accountability Act are almost written for this specific case. And so just wanted to reiterate that element. Lastly, I think that like I said before, of all the commissioners, I definitely will feel the impact of this the most, this project, given I use Murray Avenue to access Highway 85 on a daily basis. There is concern about the left turn from Stevens Creek onto Mary and that backup, because that is a backup because of access to Glenbrook. And again, the difference between retail traffic patterns and residential traffic patterns are very different from the standpoint of time of day. It's a commute pattern versus retail is not a commute pattern driven thing. And so, but having said that, the need for housing and affordable housing by far is one that people are just going to have to make sacrifices for. And that I think it's one that while it's going to be an inconvenience for me, it's one that I fully support, because I know the need is significant. And so, from that perspective, I definitely support this project. And further, where I live, there's a fair amount of traffic that actually comes from 280 that goes through the neighborhoods to get to Glenbrook, and that'll just get added to by the fact that there's now more residents at the Oaks. So, but again, I think the need for the project is significant, and definitely support the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And Commissioner Fung?
Yeah. So I think this it's been an interesting evolution. I've watched this project, as it came, multiple times for gateway hearings. So one of the things I wanted to just highlight. So first of all, I'll say I support this project. I think that one of the things that's been important in projects that we kind of all get together and view as successful, part of that has been responsiveness to the community. So, that doesn't happen. Accidentally. I think that that I see a lot of signs of responsiveness, that the applicant was hearing what the community was saying, even when sometimes that message is mixed or, So the first thing I'd say, I would identify a couple things that are notable about this. First of all, it's unquestionably a residential project. Nobody could raise any issue with that. It is 4.4% retail, and the rest of it is all residential. In this particular case, we all recognize that BMR housing is an issue. In this particular case, this project actually voluntarily exceeds that BMR requirement. You're kind of, depending on how you want to calculate the numbers, it's certainly over 15%, and can be seen as 20%. This project could have qualified with senior units at market rate for a bonus multiplier, but they chose to do this with BMR units, which I think is will be a plus for the city. This project is compliant on open space requirements. I think one of the things that people found objectionable, maybe I was a little surprised about that, was that there were questions in some of the earlier proposals about whether the open space requirement was being met, even though they're across the street from Memorial Park. But this one does comply. So again, I think a concession, and not an easy concession to make. I think that open space requirement is one of the hardest ones the projects have to meet, given our expensive land costs. There were lots of people who spoke tonight about the unmet need for senior living housing, for senior living facilities. That certainly is addressing that, and this change really makes a huge addition. The size of the memory care unit is roughly the same as the one that we approved for the forum, and the number of units that are being added here, 200 senior units, is really, enormous when you consider that it kind of took everything we had to get, 19 units at Veranda. I think that even then, on top of that, the shift to senior, to kind of a senior and family living model, it actually had the additional effect of further reducing the impact, some of the neighborhood impacts that were highlighted before. Seniors are less likely to drive. I think everybody kind of understands that. They're certainly less likely to drive during commute times. So that will help even out some of the, there would have been concerns. There would have been concerns in some of the earlier models, which were kind of condos that were aimed at working age people, that you do have a problem with peak traffic. And I think that there'll be less of one here. Let's see. I think that the reduction in height for the townhouses is actually also, again, a reduction of impact on the people. There were, I think, many people who came forward during the gateway hearings who were coming from the community immediately to the north of the Oaks, who were concerned about, hey, you're going to build a big apartment building here. Well, they're not doing that now. So I think that reduces that, reduces the impact from the abutting areas. So I guess really to sum up, I'm a big believer there's really a very serious housing problem. So I'm actually really glad that we have an opportunity here to approve a project that kind of directly addresses community needs, as well as being something that will, hopefully financially, be able to get built. These are very uncertain times financially for the city, and you see the enormous deficit that we're facing. So, I think that it's important. There's an opportunity here to do something. There are many, many huge benefits. The property tax benefits will be enormous, as well as the housing benefits. So I actually believe, I think the way things are laid out in the, I want to thank the city staff and the city attorney's office for being really, really complete on this report. I've been critical in the past, and it's just a fantastic report. So I actually think that if I pay close attention to the report, I believe I probably don't really have a choice about whether I approve this or not. But even if I did have a choice, I would certainly approve this project. So, I think it's, I hope that you'll give it consideration all as well. And that's it. Thank you.
To unmute myself again. Thank you, Commissioner Fung. And Vice Chair Wong?
Yeah, I just got a couple things. I mean, I am very concerned about the precedent here on BMR. The way we arrive at the density bonus law seems to be an issue. I think we should be taking an approach that looks at the base project and trying to understand how it complies with city's development standards. And waivers are meant only for additional bonus units. I think that's something we should look at as we go forward. When we think about the Housing Accountability Act and the density bonus law, I mean, it's hard to write this for this specific case if we have no guidelines as to what's the limit of a waiver and what point is something too high, or what's not physically precluded if limits are lowered or based upon a given submission. I mean, I don't know. We do the law, and frankly, no one, including the development community. I mean, it's just no one, including the development community, no favors if we proceed in the absence of any of these guidelines, valid guidelines that can be fairly and consistently applied. It's just weird, right? I mean, I do agree we need these units. I think it's a great project. I like the fact that it's mixed use. I like the fact that it preserves some of the retail that people are going to need on the west side. I think it's important to have the for sale housing because it helps with the property tax base, helps with the retail base. It addresses a senior living need. I think those are all very important areas. I have one other thing, is that while seniors do have less vehicles, visitation is going to be an issue. Where do they park? Less parking, is an issue. I think we need to address the lack of parking for employees and visitors. I think that's something we kind of missed here. There's going to be less parking, less driving on their end, but people are going to come visit, and there's employees that are staffed up on the other end. So I'm not opposed to the process. To the project. I'm kind of opposed to the process. And I think it's a very good project. I just really hope we can not set a bad precedent here, and that we have a way to look at process going forward. We have other ministerial approval projects that are going to happen. And I want to make sure that we have the right objective standards. We have a process to understand when changes are made and exceptions are made to our general plan, to our heart of the city, requirements, and that there's transparency and accountability in those conversations going forward. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And I'd like to really thank all of the presenters, particularly the public who came out tonight, and they continue to just provide so much research and good work for us, and they're really impressive. I do wish the project could have accommodated teachers and DeAnza students. It's been made very clear that we need to care for our seniors and provide housing and alternative living arrangements for our seniors. And I was just really impressed with the memory care floor that they are providing. I thought that was just really outstanding. It's a great new addition for the area. I think as people, who stuck with the technical aspects of this meeting, that you understand how complex the legal issues are that we are looking at, and we have had to look at a lot of statutes and case information over the past few days and weeks, and absorb it and try to come to some understanding with it. And I believe we're making the correct choice for the community here. I do think that since we are adding this density next to DeAnza College, that we need to really work on getting some quality transit across the city. And between this project and what we're seeing at the Valco site, I think it's very critical that we get some transportation solutions underway for the community. And with that, I ask that Madam Clerk, will you please conduct the vote?
Oh, okay, thank you. Let's start with Vice Chair Wang.
I vote for yes. Aye.
Commissioner Saxena?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Takahashi?
Yes.
Commissioner Fung?
Yes.
And Chair Moore?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So now we have, seeing no old business, do we have any new business?
We do not have any new business, Chair Moore.
All right.
Quick question to Chair Moore. Do you propose new business for the future here, or do you put that on the agenda later? Because I would like to talk about how we encourage transparency and accountability when we make changes to future ministerial projects as well. And do we do that here or do that later? So.
That's a procedural question. Would Attorney Petto like to weigh in on that? Do we put that under new business or staff and commission reports? How do you want that? You need to unmute. Unmute.
Thank you. Commissioner Wong, give me your question again if you don't mind. Thanks.
I think the question I'm asking is how do we propose something for next agenda item? Does it go here in the new business from a procedure point of view? And the item I'm suggesting is really about bringing up a conversation about how we, while we don't have any input to ministerial projects, it would be nice to understand the exceptions, exemptions, anything like this in the future, to have that communication to the public when those are being discussed or made, so that the public would have a better idea of what kind of conversations are happening. Because a lot of these changes happened probably about 2 weeks ago from the time we saw something. And it's good to have that level of kind of conversation so people are informed as to what exceptions are being made. Exemptions,
Yeah, proposals for upcoming meetings, I think, belong in the commission report section of the agenda.
Okay, I'll wait for that then. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, now I'm doing it. Okay, so now we move on to staff and commission reports. Commissioner Saxena? Do you have any reports?
No, I don't have any reports.
Okay, Commissioner Takahashi?
Nope, nothing.
Okay, Commissioner Fung?
I have nothing to report either.
Okay, and Vice Chair Wong?
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time looking at what's been going on with public health, what's been happening with density and planning, and spending a lot of time in some conversations. Attended the Livable California conversation probably about a week ago, a couple Saturdays ago on transit, and also spent some time talking to people at Johns Hopkins, talking about public health and the design of urban design going forward, trying to understand where planning is headed in terms of density and density in the age of a post-pandemic response in COVID and coronavirus, thinking about what that means to mass transit systems as well as what happens with urban design. And then I'd like to propose something for future business, thinking about how we actually have better communications on exceptions, exemptions as conversations are done on ministerial projects, since we're going to have a lot of those, so that even though while we can't really impact or make those decisions, those are done at the city manager level and the city level as a ministerial approval, that at least the public knows what exceptions, exemptions are made, especially when things hit on heart of city, general plan issues, things that are exceptions because of ministerial projects. And so I'd like to at least have that as a discussion item in 2 weeks to talk about how we handle that. You're on mute. Sorry, Chair Moore.
Could you explain a little bit more about what you're hoping to get out of that discussion? Like what?
I'm just trying to figure out how.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, let's say, like in this case, right, exception was made for some of these areas, and changes. Those happened in the last 4 weeks. They weren't necessarily communicated to us until we saw all the documents, right? And I think sometimes for some of these projects, it'll be too late by the time we get all these at once. And it's good for the public to understand what's going on. It's good to get that earlier feedback loop. If we know that, decisions have been made or decisions are being considered, how do we get that communication out? For example, let's say, let's just get rid of setbacks, or let's go super high, or, let's add more units than was planned, or maybe we don't build something we were supposed to build, right? We'll leave that as a concession. I mean, we've had that before in projects. You saw the earlier presentation, I believe, by Peggy. I was talking about the fact that, senior housing never gets built. Like, how did that happen? Like, who approved that, right? Or like, like in Main Street, like where you got all those weird concessions. You're like, how did that happen? Like, who made those decisions? And right, and I'm just trying to get that up earlier to the public. Okay. Even though we have no control over it, there's at least the public knowledge of what happened and how those exceptions are made.
And right, and in this case, we were pleasantly surprised with even more senior housing than we expected,
which is good too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have no reports, and with that.
Wait a second, but
we have some more. Okay, Commissioner Fung.
I understand the comment about what it is you're asking about, but on the other hand, there may be some value in hearing how the staff processes an application like that. But I think that it's pretty clear that the standard is that, and this could be part of the study if you so wish, the decision is is ministerial because it is objective, right? And those objective rules were put in place by a hearing. So I'm not really sure there's no surprise here. The decision that you're talking about isn't really a decision. It's just an objective review of the proposal that's before them.
I think there are provisions in some of the housing bills that allow us to actually have that communication much more earlier. So, and I think the public and the council still has the right to review some of those decisions, in the right to review those ministerial decisions. I really want better public notice for changes to our requirements made by potential future ministerial decisions, right? There are provisions in some of the laws to do that, and we should have that transparency and accountability. That's all I'm asking for.
Yes.
If I may ask,
please.
Just clarifying questions, because if this is something we're to present, I just want to make sure that I understand what is being expected. The city council did adopt certain procedures for how ministerial applications are processed, and those were adopted last year. And so if there is a ministerial project, we would bring that in compliance with the ministerial procedures that were adopted by council. So I'm a little confused about how this project is not a ministerial project. The one that was heard tonight, it is a discretionary project by, to the extent that it is discretionary. And so I'm just a little confused about what other procedures we're talking about or what other projects we're talking about. To the extent that a discretionary project is to be considered by a planning commission, we do bring that to the planning commission and on to council as a recommending body where it is a recommending body. So I'm just ask clarifying questions so I understand exactly what you wish to see.
Right. Vice Chair Wong, would you like to explain a little bit more?
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, this process triggered the question as to what do we do with ministerial projects? And not that this is a ministerial project, this is definitely discretionary. But for ministerial decisions, I think we need to have notice of what changes are being made and timely notice where that's possible. So we need to be able to review a decision to make sure it does meet the objectivity requirements. I know that was some of the work that council had done previously. I just want to make sure that, we reiterate what that level of standard is, or what is that standard in terms of, is that a week? Is that 24 hours? Is that what type of things, like what type of exceptions and changes that are made, right? And just to know that they're consistent with objective requirements. So I'm happy to talk to you about that offline and go into details.
We can send the council adopted procedures as well for what the council has adopted for their ministerial projects. And we will fully comply with whatever the council has adopted.
So,
Right. Thank you, Pio. And do I have any further comments? We're all good. Okay. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Good night.
Good night.